Good evening, everyone. And we are now starting a new book in the book of Proverbs. The name of this book, as we call it in the English, Proverbs, comes from this word, mishle, right? Mishle. And the idea of Proverbs uh, gives us the concept of what we call, uh, I guess, sayings or poems, sayings. It's a broad meaning. Sayings. What else is that? Sentences with ethical values. Um, Maxims, that would be some of the meaning that you can use. Um, some it is metaphorical, which means that it is an indirect expression. Um, it would be something similar to a parable, and hence the idea of Proverbs of Solomon would give us a view that Solomon is wise and he has this supernatural endowment of insight. And we have seen that when we were studying the book of Ecclesiastes. And so Proverbs are very much a collection of things of these nature, whether it may be in a form of poetry, collection of sayings, various sentences that gives us ethical values. It's metaphorical, and it's story-like to direct us to something more literal. Now, this is not a, how would you say, it's not as straightforward as we would want it to be, but nevertheless, proverbs and parables are supposedly instruments of teaching. Like Psalms is an instrument of teaching, so Proverbs is also an instrument of teaching. And in this instrument called Proverbs, uh, and used in the Hebrew language, it is a it's a means of expressing something using a similitude, a corollary, uh, 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 an item that the people who is listening to these proverbs can actually identify from their daily lives what they mean. Now, in our Oriental lives, whether it's from India or from China, uh, the Western don't have as much. We have a collection of all kinds of proverbial sayings. And because proverbial sayings is easy to remember, and hence it actually helps people learn a lot better. Now that's because we in our culture is used to it. Unfortunately, when we read the book of Proverbs, it doesn't resonate because we are reading it in the English. And so a native Hebrew speaker would find the book of Proverbs, Mishle Shlomo, would be more interesting because it is a play of words, it's a play of sounds, and it's a play of some of the things that is important in the lives of the people of Israel. And so let us begin taking a look, and then we will develop this understanding as we come along. Proverbs, again, I have mentioned, it's Mishle, Mishle of Shlomo. This is Solomon, Shlomo, the son of David, Ben David, the king of Israel. And so, as we approach this book, we do recognize that Solomon, as everyone also recognizes, that he is one who was endowed with the gift of wisdom as a king of Israel. Similar to the approach of the book of Ecclesiastes, he defines himself as a king of Israel. And all through this book of 31 chapters, you find that the style changes along the way. Now, for the first 10 chapters, they are quite uniform. But when we move towards the later part of the book of Proverbs, it then becomes a collection of single sentences. And it is a collection that repeats the themes over and over again. And it seems to be a collection of the sayings or proverbial sayings or wise sayings so that people will remember how to live before God. Now, that is the importance of the book of Proverbs. It is not so much as to teach deep truths, but more from a practical side. So as Chinese or even Indians, we offer proverbial sayings very much to teach our children important lessons so that they remember the instructions or remember the formulation of the words, and then they could pass it on to their children as well. And so Proverbs is important as a tool of teaching. What are these Proverbs for? So the purpose is here to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. Now, this is, I would say, the summary. If we need to know anything about the book of Proverbs, this would give us the very summary of this book. Just break this down, right? To know, and then the idea is in the Hebrew. These are all in statements where we say that this is about knowing things, right? About to the knowledge of wisdom, to know wisdom and instruction. And the word know is yada. And understand, yada is with regards to perception, is with regards to perceive and then to experience. And that would be how to know will come about. And so it is intended for practical living. It is not a series of it's not philosophical. This is nevertheless Hebrew Proverbs, not Greek philosophy. Hence, it's from the mouth of Solomon, the son of David, and not from the thoughts of Socrates and Plato. The differences between Greek and Hebrew is that Hebrew is concrete, it is practical, it is pragmatic. Just think of it like an Indian person or a Chinese person, that we don't have time to sit around and think and dream about things, but we really would like to know, how is it practical to life? How can we make use of it to live? And in this case, as Solomon would put it, practical living before God. The idea of wisdom, and we've seen these words before, Chokmah, in the book of Ecclesiastes. would be insight of life. Wisdom is understood as insight of life. Instruction in this case, I guess you would say that this would be correction or discipline. And if you recall, Hebrew people are Orientals, Chinese people are Orientals. And so in our culture, there is no such thing called spare the rod. Discipline is somewhat severe and harsh and serious. It is not just verbal instructions, but sometimes by goading, when you teach using a stick. And hence, instruction is very Hebrew. Correction, discipline. The next word here is to perceive. The word perceive here is to discern, to understand. And in this case, you will find that the idea to understand, it is also giving us an idea of teach. The words of understanding. Words of understanding and understanding is the same word right here. Now, we can't see it in the English, unfortunately, because the word understanding and perceive are two different words. But in the Hebrew, the word perceive and the word understanding is completely related and comes from the same root. And so to perceive the words of understanding tells us is to perceive the matters that needs to teach, right? Matters that you will need to use to teach, to discern, for discernment. And hence, we find that all of these refer to the ideas of wisdom, which is insight to life. Wisdom is insight to life, and words of understanding is also related to wisdom. The idea here to receive is very much to take hold. To take hold, to snatch, to grab. To grab. And then it says the instruction of wisdom. Understand that this word instruction is the same word here, the correction or the disciplining of wisdom. And this word wisdom here, I guess you could say that it is comprehension. It is not the technical word for wisdom that we see up here, which is here called hokmah, but it has the same nuance, insight. Right? Let me just explain the words and then we'll get back together as a whole. This word justice here is tzedek. Now, although it's translated justice, it is generally understood as what we call generosity. Judgment would be the technical word for justice. And the final word, equity, would be uprightness. Let's see, uprightness. To give prudence, the idea here of give is to bestow. I think bestow would be a good word, to permit, to bestow. It's the same word as God giving the land to Israel. Prudence. And in this case, prudence will mean discretion, the ability to, how should you say? I guess you could say that it is craftiness. Craftiness to the simple-minded. The simple-minded here would be the naive man, and to the young man, and in this case, young man is a lad, a youth, which is the same concept as simple. It will be giving him knowledge, insight, experience, and discretion. The word discretion here would mean purpose. Right? Purpose. Well, I guess that would be useful enough for us to now break down the first 4 verses. Now, take a look at these words. I must say that there are a lot of words that we use in the English Bible that cannot surface the Hebrew. And so let me just attempt to explain to you how the first 4 verses gives the summary of the purpose of the book of Proverbs. If you look at verse 2, it says, to know wisdom and instruction, it is to have the experience and the perception of insight of life, and to be able to correct and discipline others. It is also here to have discernment and understanding and the ability to teach matters regarding these kinds of wisdom and insight of life. Verse 3, and it is for people to grab hold of, to take hold, to really want such correction of insight, of comprehension to what life is all about. With regards to generosity, although we call it righteousness, the Hebrew concept of tzedek is also generosity, the ability to take care of the weak, the poor, and the fatherless. Judgment with regards to making sure that such judgments for people who are weak, who are unable to take care of themselves, is executed with true justice according to God's word. And the final word, equity, is uprightness. It is to be able to deal with the widow, the orphan, and the poor, and the powerless, and to deal with them rightly, uprightly, with straightness, and not like judges who take bribes and skew the decisions according to the rich and be biased to the poor. And so this verse 3 is very much with regards to how to create balance and follow the instructions of God to deal with the less fortunate people in society. Verse 4, to give, to permit, to give and to impart. Prudence. Prudence here would mean that there is a particular skill that is in a person that you can develop to learn how to distinguish between good and evil, to be able to distinguish between nuances of life, to be able to be smart and crafty like a serpent for those who are naive, who are simple-minded. And this would give you the kind of person that is designed for, that a simple person needs to learn to grow up to be crafty. And to the young man who is growing up from their teenage years, the knowledge and experience and insight and develop purpose in their lives as they grow up. And so they can grow up to be a wise man. And hence, this whole 4 verses gives us an incredible summary that it is gold, words of gold, words that we all need to pay attention to. And it's important for us to then develop a good sense of what Solomon gives us in wise sayings so that we too can gain insight of life. And if we have gone off the course of life, to be able to take these instructions and correct our bearings so that we're back in the light of God, that we will learn this to teach others as well. We want and value these kinds of sayings. Now, let me then say one more thing before we go on to the next few verses. We need to be able now to understand what Solomon is dealing with in this book. Now, Solomon is not giving us wise sayings just off the cuff of his experience. He is sharing with us words that is important for one to live the course of life. And this course of life is before God. And what do we know in the entire Bible that we have been studying that contains all the instructions of life? And hereby, I would like to then propose to us to understand that Solomon is trying to teach us the Torah, the right way of living. And by Torah, although we don't see the word Torah as often, and we mistranslate it as law, it is really instructions of life. And because this is given in the form of Proverbs or Mishle, in the form of sayings, in the form of indirect conversation, in the form of parables, in the form of what we call a representation of the Torah, then we would have to understand this. The Proverbs that Solomon is showing is this. We are seeing the Proverbs, but the Proverbs is actually conveying the Torah. And it is showing the Torah in a more what we call well, I guess we could use this word. It's a big word. It's how should we say? It's a aphorism, right? Let me just use this big word first before I can think of a simpler word. It means that Solomon is taking the instructions of God called Torah, and he is repackaging it in a perception to the reader as a person, as an object, as an everyday terminology that they can use in the course of life, and showing the importance of the Torah of God. And so this is called aphorism, that you take imagery or human imagery to mask over the law of God. And so that you can look at this imagery and then you can see the beauty of the law of God. And so this is important for us to understand the idea of Proverbs. If we don't catch these concepts, then Proverbs becomes strings of words. And the English certainly doesn't help us understand the book of Proverbs a whole lot more, because as you can see, every English word here is not able to convey and capture the essence of the Hebrew. Now, I would say that we will be treading a lot slower than we would be had we been doing the book of Joshua, the book of Deuteronomy, or even Isaiah, because the book of Proverbs is a very different style of writing. It's an instrument that plays on words. It's an instrument that uses words to represent what is important in life. And to Solomon, who knows God very well, now instructs the people how to live right by giving them these kinds of what we call maxims, proverbial sentences, so that they will remember in life, and then they can picture this and pass it down one to another. Now, if those of you who are Chinese educated, in school, you would probably have learned lots of maxims, principles, rules of life that is expressed in poetic form, that words have similar sounds. And that is what the book of Proverbs is all about. It is teaching something which is very simple, very normal, but embedding it with poetic ways so that you will remember what you need to do. And that is the Proverbs of Solomon. We come to verse 5. A wise one. The word here is the wise one, right? Of course, we put in the word man, but the word man in italics in the New King James just merely tells us that it's not there. It's provided by the translator, and this is this really means a wise one, right? A wise one. If you are a wise one, if you are one who is hakam, you're one who understands and appreciates wisdom, right? And so doing, you would realize that you will be very smart. You will have insight. You would see things that others can't see. And so let me explain wisdom, and then we will not deal with it with too much, all right? The word wise here is hakam. And basically, it tells us that he is skillful, and skillful with words and I guess lessons. He is insightful. I'm not sure whether you've seen it. We always saying that you grow older and wiser. Well, growing older doesn't mean you're wise. Old is old, wise is wise. So we need to be able to keep these two separate. And so let's not impose our modern Greco-Roman knowledge onto the book of Proverbs. So wise really means that he has experience in life, that he has learned what it means to live, right? He is also very shrewd. He is very crafty, I guess. Meaning when he gets into trouble, he knows how to navigate out. He's very cunning. Because of his experience in life, he knows how to get out of trouble. And that's the notion. I'm just giving you this kind of expression of wise. He is very intelligent. Intelligent because he is able to use his lessons of life and experience of life to find solutions in life. I hope you become quite appreciative of the word wisdom or hokmah in the Hebrew language, and the word wise here, hakam, is an adjective. The wise one, if you are a wise one, you will want to hear. You want to listen. You want to pay attention. You will want to, well, in this case, increase. The word increase literally means to add, right? You want to add to your learning. Now, in this case, it is from the same word, learn, to teach. And so it is so apt that the word wise, hakam really tells us that you learn from life so that you can teach others of your life. And that means that the wise one will want to listen to what others say and do so that they can increase to their own learning, that they can teach more as well. And a man of understanding. Now, the man of understanding is a man who is able to teach. He has an ability to comprehend. And don't you think that this word wise and a man of understanding is very much similar? It's like an A and a B. That it is the same definition of a person who is able to look at life and look at situations and is able to understand it very quickly. And so that he is able to, well, I guess here it says attain wise counsel. Now, the word attain here is acquire. Acquire here would also mean to get, to get what you don't have, and now you get. If that's the word attain here, you acquire, and so you are now getting new knowledge. And what is this knowledge? This is called wise counsel. Now, the word wise counsel literally means, how would you say, good directions, right? Good directions, or good advice. As you can see, the wise man and the man of understanding are actually talking about the same thing, that he would want to hear and look and see things and increase to gain what he doesn't have, so that he learns more to teach. A man of understanding, a man who knows how to look at things and comprehend things, who can teach, will want to gain more good instructions and good advice. And hence, this is a introduction to the book of Proverbs, that it is meant for people who really want to learn. If we don't want to learn, we really don't care about Proverbs, because it's not a straightforward book to read, because it's not a literal book. It is a book that plays on words, it plays on poetry, it plays on ideas, it plays on examples, it plays on certain symbolisms and representative of ideas. And so to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles, understand this. This is an A, B, C, and D. All of these are an encouragement for us to understand. To understand, again, is to consider, is to discern. We want to know what it means So we want to know what the proverb means. The singular for proverbs is mashal. Again, it literally means a parable, words of wisdom that gives you certain ethics, maxims, and principles of life given in short phrases so that you can remember. It's actually meant for a person who to gain more understanding in the mind. And so once it strikes us and it resonates with us, it calls for action, right? The word enigma, that's an English word. This word means very much a satire. A satire, something sometimes you mock other people, but you don't do it directly. All right. That something that you can taunt. And so sometimes you teach people in a reverse psychology, right? So an enigma, if you understand a satire, means I'm saying something nice to you, but actually you mean just the opposite. Now, I would say the British people knows how to do this very well. They can mock you with such illustrious English language that you will be amazed, but you are being mocked and you will still smile. And that's the kind of satirical language of a proverb. It has an interpretation that's behind the words. The next one here is that you would also know the words of the wise, the skillful language. Skillful language, word of the wise. The wise man doesn't speak a lot, as you can tell. The wise man says a lot by saying little, because the choice of words that they use is very carefully selected to convey deep instructions by saying few words. And in this case, the Hebrew proverbs are very similar to Chinese proverbs. And if you are Chinese educated and you would understand what I say, 4 words actually tells a whole story. Why? Because the 4 words are carefully chosen because it has depth, it relates to each other, it shares nuances, and even more so, it shares the same kind of tone or sound, right? The last word here is riddles. We call it riddle, and riddle means it is something that is dark, something that has a double meaning. So a riddle will tell you something very straight in a literal sense, but that is not what it's trying to say. You know that it will sound literal and it sounds a little bit awkward or a little bit strange, but the real meaning is the meaning that's behind. And so understand this as well, that we want to be the wise person, the wise man. We want to increase our insight of life. We want to be able to understand all the, well, look at this, all the proverbs, the satire, the skill language, and the words of double meaning. And hence, by learning all of these, we will remember. And please always remember, there is a double meaning to the word learn here in this case, because the double meaning here is also to teach. And so a wise man is always ready to teach another person how to live without forcing the person, but using skilled words, using few words, but really insightful of his experience, and that is wise. It is not about old, it's about wise. Now let us come to the next phrase that is in verse 7. Verse 7 is a very interesting verse, and I hope that it will become our memory verse as well. It says here, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And hence, as challenging as the book of Proverbs is, we need to actually peek under the Hebrew language a little bit. First of all, the word fear is to be afraid. And the word of the Lord means it belongs to the Lord, right? It's like the love of God, the wisdom of God, the Spirit of God. So the fear of God. So you notice this word fear of God is in the same context as belonging. So the word of means to belong to God. So what do you mean that there is certain fear that belongs to God? Yes, there is. You see, the love of God is talking about the love that belongs to God, the love that God has in his definition of word ahav. That is, God will give to the ones he loves, right? The word of God means the words that God is speaking, the words that God wants man to hear, and it belongs to him. And so the fear of God, right here, this word, the fear of the Lord, means that the very expression of being afraid, not of darkness, not of phobia of spiders, or being afraid of your enemy, or being afraid of the teacher. This word here, fear of the Lord, means you must be afraid of God. This is the unique fear the sense of being afraid that is uniquely directed to God, that belongs to God, that we do not fear anything else like the way we fear God. This is what it means to fear. It is not reverential. There's no such thing called reverential fear. The idea is to fear God. And we read of it in the book of Joshua as well, in the book of Deuteronomy, all through fear God. Why? Because he is a consuming fire. He will judge. And so the fear of the Lord means that particular fear that exudes from who God is. And so we only need to fear God. We don't need to fear other people, because they can't do anything to us as how God can do to us. Now, when you fear God, it says it is the beginning. The beginning, Rashid, right? The beginning literally means the best. It also means the first. It also means the start. You see, there are a couple of words for this word, Rashid. It is the chief. It is the fundamental aspect. When you talk about knowledge, you must first talk about fear. And so what is knowledge? Now, knowledge here is not the English language knowledge. And as I had mentioned up front, knowledge comes from the word to know, right? It is the noun of something that you know, which you perceive, that you experience. And then this will become knowledge. You see, knowledge is not a magical, supernatural infusion of an ability. There is no such thing. I mean, this is not this really tells us that in the Hebrew language, knowledge is not something that you dream of, that you meditate. Knowledge is something that you live. You know what life is all about because you have lived it. You have been told about it. That's perception, right? You perceive what the wise man tells you, and then you learn, and you lived it, and you have crossed the river with it, and you experience, and hence that entirety of what you know becomes the body of knowledge. And so it says here that the fear of the Lord, when you need to be afraid, that unique fear that you dedicate to God, because when you think of God, He's going to judge you. You must fear because He is a consuming fire. And once you have the fear of the Lord, it is the start of learning life. It is the best part of life's experiences. The fear of God will open up our eyes to knowing the difficulties and challenges of life, to see the solution, not just the problem. And hence, when you say knowledge, it is not math knowledge, science knowledge, it is not philosophy. It is about experiences of life, because this whole book is about living before God. And then it says fools. The word fools here is the one who is foolish. The one who is foolish is also the silly one. And we'll come to that. The one who despises knowledge is called foolish. All right. What else can we say? He is one who despises knowledge and wisdom as well. He is the one who is the opposite of the wise man. And so we use this word, the foolish man, compared to the wise man. So the fool is not a stupid person. Please do not misunderstand foolishness to not being clever or not being intelligent. Life has many aspects of knowledge, as I mentioned. You can have knowledge of math, of science, of philosophy, and all that kind of stuff. But when we talk about knowledge here, it is about living before God. It is not life in general. So the entire book of Proverbs is not teaching the general principles of life. It is telling us how to live before God. And hence the fear of the Lord is the start. If you don't have the fear of the Lord, then you are classified as fools, because you despise wisdom. The word despise here literally means to disrespect, right? To hold in contempt. You know, when you have a court, right, and you talk back to the judge will hold you in contempt. And then we always wonder, what is this hold you in contempt? It means that you have despised the role and dignity of the judge. You have shown disrespect of the judge. And so a fool is one who disrespects wisdom and correction. And so the word wisdom here is hokmah, wise words. One who, well, we'll leave this. The word wisdom is one, words of the wise. Okay, words of the wise. And then instruction here would be correction. Correction, being chastened, or discipline. Now, this is where we will come to a close for today. You see, a fool is a smart person too. He is smart in his own ways. He may know a lot of things. He could be, well, in our case, many PhDs. But a fool is not described as lack of intelligence. A fool here is described as one who does not fear the Lord. A fool is one who does not have the knowledge of how to live before God. A fool is one who is said to be disrespectful of words of wisdom when people come to correct him and discipline him. And so where a person who rejects good advice, a person who rejects good instructions, a person who rejects discipline that is coming from God is one who is called foolish. And so we read in the Psalms, the fool says there is no God. Well, a fool is not a one who is stupid. A fool is one who rejects God. So in this case, the fool is one who rejects the instructions of God. And so let me close by saying this. Remember, I said the importance of what is behind the words is what we don't see. Torah is instructions and directions. It points us to how we must live. And hence, the Torah is the wisdom. The Torah is the, well, so-called instruction, the way it disciplines. The Torah is giving us knowledge of how to live. And hence, notice, it is not Bible study that teaches us knowledge. It is not Bible study that helps us to be wise. And let me end by saying this. It is the fear of the Lord. And so I hope that you would spend the weekend to think through the first 7 verses of the book of Proverbs. Fear of the Lord literally means to tell us in the Oriental way. Remember, the Oriental conservative Chinese family, and I think also in the Indian family, the father is always pictured as one who would hold the rod, who holds the cane, that he is the one that you will not cross. You will make sure that whatever you do, you would please him, because you don't want to see the cane coming down. And so there is a certain fear that the father exudes to the children. And so that gives us a parallel of the fear of the Lord, that God is one who can send fire down from heaven, like how Elijah called fire from the Lord to burn up the offering that is drenched with water. The fire of God is to exude, to impose on our minds that God is a judge, that whatever we do and say and we choose, we need to be careful. And when we know that attitude, when we have that attitude towards God, then it is the best. You see here? The best, the first, the start of our experience of walking with God, our knowledge of God, our knowledge of how to live before God. And so the entirety of the Proverbs, behind the Proverbs, is this word, Torah, God's instructions to living. And that would be how we can actually understand the book of Proverbs a whole lot better. And with this, we come to an end, well, at least for the first 7 verses of the book of Proverbs to give us an introduction to how we can then move on with the entire book of Proverbs. All right.